Awesome. I think we will go ahead and get started because everyone can kind of join as they come in today. And as always, that video will be live on our page afterwards. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining for our February Facebook Live event for the NVLD project. Excited to have you all here today with us. We have an exciting topic. We're going to be talking about online education today with our partners and colleagues over at Winston Prep. Some of you may have heard of them before. I think we've done some projects with them in the past in a Facebook Live last year, the year before. So excited to have everyone back on today and to talk a little bit about a different topic that we have not addressed before, which is online education. So I've got two of Winston Prep's employees and directors with us. And the first one is Tabitha Mancini. She is the director of Winston Online, which is Winston Preparatory School's online campus. She holds a bachelor's degree from the University of California in Berkeley and a master's in educational psychology from the University of Connecticut. With her various roles in education, she's focused largely on the areas of special education and the transition from K through 12 into post-secondary education, online programming for students with learning disabilities. She's been a director of disability services at the university level and has taught graduate courses in the area of disability services and higher education as an adjunct faculty member at the University of Connecticut for 6 years. So lots of experience in this department and very excited to hear what she has to say today and learn from her. And we also have Michele Heimbauer with us again. She was on our last Facebook Live with Winston Prep. She's the Associate Director of Winston Innovation Lab for the Winston Preparatory School. She's a graduate of Queens College Speech Language Pathology program and has been in the education field for over 20 years with a diverse population of students with learning disabilities as an SLP, learning specialist, and administrator. In her current role within the Winston Innovation Lab, she is passionate about advancing how we educate tomorrow's future. She's dedicated in supporting and applying research endeavors while cultivating the science of learning through collaborative professional development and parent education opportunities. As I understand it, she might be talking a little bit about some of that research today. So excited to hear what everyone has to say. And I am going to hand it over to Tabitha from here because she is the expert, and I know that that's why everyone is here. So,
well, thanks, Samantha. I appreciate the warm welcome and introductions there. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for carving out some time and your interest in logging on. I'm very excited to be talking with you and also for some Q&A at the end. Just to quickly go over a quick agenda so that you know what's coming up. The topics that we are going to be covering. I'll start with an overview of Winston Prep so that you kind of just have that overview in your mind and that scaffolding, and then an explanation of our model. I'll provide some information about our online programming and really online comments about online programming in general. And Michele is going to go over a learning profile of one of our online students with NVLD. I'll discuss some of the implications and approaches to the student's education. And I know Michele will probably have some words of wisdom as well. And then Samantha will facilitate a Q&A at the end. All right, with that, I have notes. So an overview of Winston Prep. Winston Prep is a school specializing in working with students with learning disabilities, executive function challenges, and NVLD. We opened our doors with our first campus in New York City in 1981, and now today we have 8 campuses, which does include a transition program with locations both in New York City and also in San Francisco, and Winston Online, our fully online campus. We're also excited. Winston Online is in its 3rd year, and we just launched Winston in College, which we offer learning support services to college students across the nation. So the Winston model really is a network of distinct processes, which I'll go over, focused on both academic content and skill acquisition, in which we use evidence-based teaching models to integrate pro-social emotional education. So we know that these skills are critical to not only educational attainment, but also in successful employment as well. And really our goal is to create sustainable and independent learners over their lifetime. So the Winston Innovation Lab, which Michele works out of, is our in-house research department and is really at the heart of all that Winston does, all of our work. The Innovation Lab is responsible for teacher excellence and leadership development programs, both at Winston and also for other outside organizations seeking to develop their staff in various ways as it relates to teaching and learning for those with learning disabilities. We also collaborate, as Samantha had said, with other notable experts in the field, such as NVLD project. And we have been collecting data and doing longitudinal studies on our teaching and student outcomes for quite some time. And most recently, we've collected and analyzed data on learning outcomes during the pandemic. And we're very, very excited to report that while nationally students experience tremendous learning losses, our students actually across the board had learning gains, which also include the areas of math and reading, which are the largest areas of learning loss across the nation, especially impactful for students with various types of learning disabilities. So our model, it's really, I think it's easier to, or best processed when thinking about it as 4 major pillars to our programming. And the first is groupings. So we begin by grouping our students by learning profile, not strictly by age or grade. And this really promotes a more precise teaching and also maximizes the class instruction time. So that's one. The other is a continuous feedback system, and which is really a framework that we've designed to gain a deeper understanding of our students and to facilitate the independence through continual assessment, remediation, and then the analysis of the student's response to an individualized program. So it looks like a circle. There's actually 2 parts to it, which I'll explain. So this continuous feedback cycle. So we again begin with the understanding of each student. We start with assessment of their learning profile. This gives us an understanding, and then we develop the programming. As the student is gaining skills, then we gain further understanding. We see how they're responding, and then again we're assessing. We are gaining that understanding and also modifying and tweaking a student's program kind of as they go along. The third part is what we call the third pillar is the social emotional piece. So at Winston Prep, we have identified 8 major skill domains that we feel students should possess in order to be independent learners for a lifetime. We call these the qualities of a sustainable and independent learner, or QSIL for short. So if I don't say it, I slip up and say QSIL, you'll know what that means. It happens quite a bit. And at Winston, we not only incorporate these skills across the academic day, we do incorporate them across the academic day, both explicitly and implicitly. But we also include them in our measurement and assessments of our students, as well as our report writing. So we keep track of their growth in each of the skill areas using constant observation as well as rubrics and a survey system. Students are also asked to self-assess in each of these skill areas. And the fourth is our focus program. The focus program is at the cornerstone of every Winston education. Within the focus program, a student meets one-to-one for 45 minutes daily with their focus instructor. Focus instructors are matched strategically with students based on the student's needs and the background and areas of expertise of their focus instructor. Using that continuous feedback system that I mentioned earlier, The focus instructor develops a deep understanding of their focus student through evaluations provided by the families or different assessments, of course, our neuropsych, as well as our own assessment protocols. And then from there, we individualize a skill-based program for each student using and identifying the most critical areas that the student might need support in. So for example, many of our students' focus goals include social communication, academic problem solving, comprehension, writing. So also fundamental to the programming are the 8 social emotional skills that I mentioned. And the focus instructor works to build a student's proficiency in these skill areas with the goal of ultimately creating a confident and independent learner. So the focus instructor is really driving the student's programming and communicates and strategizes regularly with the student's content teachers and parents. So the content teachers being those core subjects like math, science, English. So the focus instructor, again, being the driver of the student's education and communicating out back and forth to all the stakeholders. And of course, most importantly, working closely with each student, of course. All right, a little breath here. So information about our online programming and really a lot of comments about online programming in general, especially for, and I'll talk more, a little deeper about applying it to this, to our population of students that we work with a little bit later on too. I think it'll be a little easier after Michele talks about a profile. So online learning really comes in a variety of forms. So it can be hybrid, blended, synchronous, asynchronous. So that synchronous means live, and then asynchronous is not live. And each program will vary tremendously in so many ways. So some schools create their own content and build their courses from scratch, and some hire outside firms to do things such as their contract with textbook companies actually to purchase their pre-built courses and implement them. And it can be synchronous or asynchronous. Just depends. At Winston Online, our courses are synchronous. So they're live, they're 45 minutes in length. And we have a 15-minute break between classes, a lunch break. And when we end the day with art or PE, Wednesdays are half days that conclude with an all-school meeting that an entire school gets together and meets. Just announcements, just all kinds of things happen. A lot of announcements and sharing happens on the Wednesdays. We also have Wellness Wednesdays, a variety of activities. So the time that's spent in the class is really highly engaging, and it's intense remediation, but it's broken up into chunks. So at Winston, that is our primary model for the online, using online modality to teach the overall Winston model. So during the pandemic, schools were not ready to go online, as we know, as we remember, and they didn't have the infrastructure to do so, and so they had to figure out what technology to use, number one, how to translate their lesson plans online, how to engage students in this modality, how to use the technology themselves, how to teach students to use it. So teachers were being asked to do all of this really quickly without having any background in any of the technology or course design. So this approach is, as we know it, as emergency response. It's not planned by intentional design. So it makes sense that some students didn't do well, right? It wasn't planned or designed with intention from the start. But regardless, there were students who actually did really benefit from certain aspects of the online modality. Instructor engagement in many cases can be higher in an online environment. You can have very quick feedback due to norms of email exchange, and that being sometimes a primary source or one primary source of engagement and communication. You can have quizzes and testing if a school does that, and knowledge checks being instantly graded in some cases, again, if they're using that tool. But there's a variety of ways, in addition to the pedagogy and teaching methods and things, but there's a variety of ways to get instant feedback, which is nice. Multiple modal assessments and teaching tools such as videos, which allow students to really deeply interact with the content, such as closed captioning. I can go on and on, I won't here, but I could, about the benefits of the kind of universally designed approach with closed captioning. And they can repeat certain portions of the video as many times as necessary. So, if you, especially with our students that have these big discrepancies in things that they're really good at and things that they really struggle with. So you can skip over the things that you already know, you can go right in and repeat and repeat and repeat certain particular areas. And a lot of students find that incredibly helpful. There's also podcasts, a variety of technology tools. They're always available, such as assistive technology. Again, can talk a lot about that as well. You may ask questions, feel free to ask. And rather than giving a student a handout to work from, just handing it to them, they go and they do it at their desk or they take it home. Students, there's technology that we use a lot, and teachers can work interactively at the same time on a handout, and they can manipulate that handout so live, so it becomes a much deeper engaging assignment, and it gives student really rapid feedback so that there's instant connections, the connections that can be formed, and adjustments can be made on the spot. So you have this really reduced, intense time spent with a student with this really rapid feedback. Incredibly helpful. And also continuous control of one's environment as well is a huge benefit. A lot of students find extremely beneficial. And I would say that a lot of people in their professional lives find that really beneficial as well, to create the space that you need as an individual to work at your maximum potential. And so online learning does provide that opportunity, and so the student can create the workspace that they need. They have the ability to move around when needed, to take frequent breaks. So they're learning really how to also self-accommodate, which is a skill that is incredibly helpful as they move through the many transitions of their life. At the same time, they can self-accommodate at the same time that they're receiving instruction. And I would venture to say that most of our students with LDs have experienced profound lack of control in their education environments. And with that comes a lot of deep frustration, which can aid in the development of learned helplessness. So again, this ability to be able to craft things as you need it is incredibly helpful to many, many students. There's also increased ability for enrichment opportunities. At Winston Online, we have a lot of virtual field trips to museums really around the world, guest speakers, hands-on activities such as learning how a car works by doing it hands-on. We just most recently had a speaker from NASCAR send kits to all of our students, and then they assembled them with the NASCAR representative. And she was walking them through and explaining the different processes and how a car works. Is really fascinating. And the students loved it. And then another benefit as well is to being online is how actively learning with a lot of coaching how to responsibly navigate the online space and use the different tools such as assistive technology that's appropriate for each student, how to have meetings, how to conduct yourself, what's appropriate, and a lot of really very fine-tuned guiding in that, and allows a student to really develop those skills, but really hone them over time as well with a lot of guidance. So using computer software and applications, and they get experience in really, again, refining those abilities over time. Pause. Creating social engagement with an online program. So I'm sure everybody's, definitely thinking about that, as we should. Is incredibly important, as we've discovered and realized how important that social interactions and connections are for everyone as human beings. So the key here, I would say, in an online environment, we can argue always, but especially in an online environment, is the intentionality part. And so if you have heard me say that a few times, it's critical in an online environment. So, and I can't underscore that enough. And this can come in many forms. So in virtual and in person, being intentional and doing possibly a blend. So there's a lot of different ways to incorporate social engagement. And a person's need for both in person and virtual are each person's really different. And what we want to do is really anyone, Winston or not, is really assess what a person needs, and then put a plan in place person to person, just as we do academically. And so we'll want to know what types of online opportunities are available for students, and what type of in-person opportunities there are, such as community resources, possibly a part-time job, scheduled time with friends and sports. There's a number of ways to have in-person experiences outside of the classroom. And we work really closely with our families in this way. In addition, we have things like All School, beginning of the year, All School trip at an outdoor camp at the beginning of the year for all students. And then we also have an in-person graduation opportunities and some regional opportunities. So it's really a mix. We're looking at the student holistically and figuring out what each student needs, and being, again, very intentional about building a program around that. And also something to look for in any online program, if you're looking for a program, is not just a course by course, but a full program, is school spirit and involvement, and how that's created. So we definitely want to, when you're looking for programs, be able to look with that lens and identify those areas and how that's created. So the bottom line is that every educational program really needs to start with a solid foundation and model. And then how do you translate that online, and how do you create an individualized experience for each student? So we really need to think about the everyday lived experience of each child, their full day, what it's like, that lived experience of what it's like to be in that program. Is it broken up? How much, just in different ways. Just imagine yourself as that child, the different social opportunities, what it feels like. All of those things is where we kind of want to be thinking about when we're choosing an online program. So it really does come down to two things, which is the foundation, the teaching model, what's that like, and then how we use that, how we employ that in the online modality. So with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Michele so that she can talk about a learning profile of one of our students.
Thank you,
And
Tab.
I took a lot of notes and have questions, but I'm curious if Michelle's going to actually answer some of my questions in this section. So I'm going to save mine, but I definitely want to come back to just some of those things, like see if Michele answers it prior to me getting to it. But that was really interesting. Thank you so much.
So hello, everybody. I'm going to throw a couple of images up on the screen just to help you kind of visualize the continuous feedback system that Tabitha was talking about, because I think it's truly important, especially for students who are learning at an online program, that this type of system is implemented. So I just want to share that visual with you. So this top half, like Tabitha was explaining, first we assess a student and develop a deep understanding of who they are as a learner, where their strengths and weaknesses are, not just academically, but also cognitively, what's at the root of their learning disabilities and difficulties, and how that impacts their academic performance and learning, but also that social emotional learning piece is part of that assessment. And I know Tabitha mentioned the QSIL skills that we are constantly assessing. We did develop in our research department, our innovation lab, a valid and reliable measure to formally assess these what's considered soft skills, these social emotional learning skills. And we are currently working to validate and develop reliability outside of Winston Prep. So stay tuned for that. I know it's especially important for our students with NVLD. So we develop that understanding, develop a program based on that understanding, and then the student responds as soon as we're working with them. So again, we assess that response. It further develops our understanding. We fine tune the program. And this is a continuous, constant system feedback loop that we're using. But this bottom half is the part that we're teaching the students to do so that they can do this process on their own, so that they can become reflective and aware and help themselves become more independent. So they walk away with the ability to self-assess and understand themselves, and then base their actions, decisions, and creations on that understanding. And then be aware of that response, and again, use that response to further self-assess themselves. So this is a continual process that we explicitly teach, and it's really helpful for our students, especially that have difficulty with that awareness and cause and effect, understanding relationships, how their actions and decisions can impact others. This is really key to that development. Now I want to go into specifically NVLD, and I want to show another image just to clarify, this is how we think of NVLD. I think it's helpful to have a visual of this to kind of see how pervasive and overlapping it could be. So at the root of NVLD, what we find is that they have that weakness in visual spatial skills. So that's that cognitive foundational core deficit, and those weak visual spatial skills, which allow us to understand perspectives, understand relationships, make connections between details, be able to empathize, understand what somebody else is thinking, understand nuance and abstract information. That's all tied to visual spatial skills. So when that piece is weak, when you have a core deficit in visual spatial skills cognitively, it's going to impact your whole world. It's going to impact reasoning and higher order thinking, because in order to do that skill, you need to be able to understand perspectives and see how things are connected, understand how the details fit in to form a big picture. You need to be able to visualize and use imagery to understand more abstract concepts. You need to have those visual spatial skills to tap into your executive functions. So if you don't see how things are connected or the relationships between them, understanding cause effect, part whole relationships, there's no way you're going to be able to use executive function skills to make sense of your world and organize information and approach something in a strategic and organized way. It's going to be very hard to sort, prioritize, and organize information when you don't, when you have real trouble seeing how things are connected. And that also ties into that social communication realm. So visual spatial skills, of course, you need to develop that empathy. You need to be able to understand what is your conversational partner is feeling or thinking, based on nonverbal expressions, based on the nuance of the context that's going around. And you also need to be able to apply those higher order and reasoning comprehension skills to social communication situations. So being able to understand the meaning, the nuance of a social situation. A lot of times it's not so concrete. It's more of an abstract social interaction. So that's where that kind of can fall apart. And then math concepts. So typically as they're younger, basic math facts are pretty easy for students with NVLD to understand, to grasp and to remember, because they're very rote and concrete. But once you start becoming, introducing more complex numerical operations, and especially math problem solving, where they have to apply their knowledge in a flexible way, and understand how the details are coming together and apply that higher order reasoning, math problem solving becomes a real challenge. So I just wanted to go over that kind of quickly, just to give you an idea of how we understand NVLD and what kind of lens we're looking at when we start that assessment process. Okay. So the student we're going to talk about, Tabitha is going to really go into how we address the programming piece in that online education realm. So this student, just to give you a kind of image of who this student is, when she came in, we looked initially at her cognitive scores, her social emotional information, her academic scores, recommendations, and referrals and conversations with anybody who knew her, including her parents, as well as herself. And what our conclusions were that she really struggled with that visual spatial piece. Her visual spatial reasoning, visual memory was all significantly weaker than her verbal reasoning and verbal skills. There was a significant discrepancy between there. Her working memory, especially for verbal rote information, was very strong. So she was great at remembering and spitting back concrete information. But when we tested her reading comprehension, she could answer literal factual questions, but it was really hard for her to respond to the more abstract inferential prediction, relationship type of questions. So that higher order comprehension weakness was there. Socially, she struggled to navigate social situations, even though she had a robust vocabulary. She had difficulty understanding those nonverbal cues and just generally social etiquette, what's expected. And that's information that you have to kind of pick up on as you mature and experience these social situations. So she couldn't absorb that. She had to be taught that explicitly. She had difficulty initiating conversations and engaging in reciprocal conversation. She would try her best, but her questions were often awkward, and she would just walk away abruptly if the conversation was boring or didn't interest her. So, and not appreciating what that impact might have on her social standing and friendships. When she was young, I think we noted that she didn't understand kind of physical boundaries, and she would just hug strangers. She would hug anybody. So again, that understanding that social nuance and etiquette just wasn't there. Social emotionally, also she tended to withdraw and avoid tasks when she felt anxious or overwhelmed. and she lacked that awareness and ability to problem solve. And that's problem solving is again tied to that higher order reasoning as well as the executive function skills. She struggled significantly in math, especially with the more visual based math like geometry and functional math skills. So identifying money, counting change, so those functional skills. And then her executive functioning really was impacted by having difficulty organizing her writing, difficulty maintaining her engagement to a task, tangential conversations, things like that. But like I said, she had strengths in that verbal working memory. So auditory processing assessments came out strong as long as they were detail and fact related. Once she had to do something with that, manipulate that in some way, that fact, concrete information, that's when things kind of fell apart. Okay, back to Tabitha.
Thanks, Michele. Okay. So many things. I have so many situations and I have some notes. But one of the things that I guess, thinking about that everyday experience of the student is that, being also overwhelmed by all the different stimulation in that, trying to attune to different things in social and make meaning out of different social situations and what's happening, and pay attention to, a lesson or what's happening with the instructor. So in an online environment, if the class size is small enough, then you still have social interactions, and with your peers and the teacher, but it's very focused. And you don't have, it's like sometimes kind of swatting at the same time. You're trying to pay attention to all of these different things happening, when you're online, you can have this very concentrated, rich moments and instruction. We can do things like, show pictures, show a video here, I made reference to these here, podcasts, and also to be able to say, what are the inferences? What does this mean to you? So again, it's just very focused, and you can you can navigate different types of mediums very easily. So it gets very, very rich and creates a very deep learning environment, which many students benefit, especially our students with NVLD. So we're working and attuning to and knowing that they do struggle in this area, along with some of the academic pieces, and you kind of have those two collide. And so that's the way. It's just with these rich tools, it's incredibly helpful. With the student, she's then, because we do start by grouping our students with like profiles, then we're able to also really concentrate and attune to this, this group's particular learning profile, rather than having students that are kind of, all over the place. We're just grouping a bunch of students together with different learning profiles, and you're kind of having to, go from one student to the other student. They're like, wait, it's more difficult for the teacher, and doesn't lead to the incredible rich environment that happens when you do group like learners together. So this student, some of her goals were understanding, and then the goals, which do change with the student, is understanding and following multi-step directions was a challenge. She missed certain parts of the instruction. It's common for students also to easily fatigue. So developing stamina and resilience for academic tasks is a constant goal. And we are able to work, because then we have the focus program. The student is working individually one-on-one with that focus instructor. That focus instructor is then communicating with all of these content teachers, and you have this very kind of rich academic environment and social environment online. And everyone is communicating. So, you know, I guess I've said it so many times, but to go back is just, you know, I guess when you think about a student in a group of 30 other students or 15 other students that are all have a variety, just wide variety of different learning profiles, and a student is struggling to make those inferences and to pay attention and to be organized, and then in the academic task trying to figure out these word problems, the time on task and the time that a student is actually has individualized attention, it becomes very small. So those learning opportunities are very, very slight and very small in a traditional classroom where you have this type of environment, and online, and with our model becomes this very rich, deep environment that's very, very targeted. And we can pick up on a student's, all the nuanced things that are happening and compare those, and the student gets instant feedback, both through, you know, just the technology tools that we're able to draw on, but also, you know, the teaching and the small class sizes that we're able to provide as well. Active reading, text coding, the organization aspect. So we can kind of go on and on about different, you know, some of her different goals, but we saw tremendous growth in her ability to process and retain more information at a really much quicker pace, and always with all of our students, but especially with the student guided weekly self-reflection is also a really key part of the programming as well, which is part of that QSIL. We're always in every moment in those content classes, and then drawing that back into focus, being able to you know, bring up, and we have this rich data and this observation that happens where we can make you know, give feedback and talk to the student, and really be inquisitive with the student on, you know, what happened, and help them unpack. And then also to draw from those outside experiences, because we want to know what's happening outside of the classroom and some of those social, what a student is able to, or what they do pick to be involved in, because that also will change over time as well, because we want to create a larger social battery, right? And so that happens over time. And so we will watch this and help the student grow in that way. And that is information, that is fodder that we use in those focus sessions as well. And really looking at the student over as a development of life skill acquisition, including the academic and the social emotional, is really the larger goal. And it's a very, very dynamic process. And we're really always focused on transition. So the multiple transitions in life. So we're looking at transition as a lens. So you're looking through a lens of transition always with a student. So not just that it happens and that you offer the student to come into their IEP at 16 and start talking about transition in their senior year, but really through their entire lifetime and their entire time through us, that we have that transition lens on. So thinking about, you know, also having goals such as workplace skills. The student had a part-time job, which was incredibly helpful because we could use that in self-advocacy. Her self-advocacy really shined, and she was able to navigate that. And we were able to help coach her in that environment as well. So professional social interactions, budgeting is incredibly important. Community activities as well, but career research, such as what type of education, what type of things are interesting to them, application, how to do that, salary, job trajectories, and then also health and wellness, how to cook, cleaning, hygiene. These are all things that we're thinking about, and then we're working with the student on, and looking again through the lens of transition. So ultimately, what we do is we use the content to develop skills rather than traditional classrooms where it's focused on rote memorization and testing and really getting through the content material, really focused on the student and what types of skills that they need and that they need to be developed for their lifetime, really.
It's really interesting
All right.
because like,
What questions do you have?
well, I was just, so I think I've said it before, but like I used to be a teacher. And so it's really interesting to hear some of this because I'm sitting there and I'm like, public schools don't teach any of this. Like they get to college and they don't have half of these skills that you guys are teaching in these such specialized programs and classroom settings and stuff. And so it's just like, and that was one of the things when I was a teacher, I was like teaching my students how to speak in public and how to present, even though that wasn't really what I was like my subject matter. But it's just really interesting. I like love hearing you talk about this because it's like, not only are you catering and developing programs specific to a student versus like teaching to testing or teaching to curriculum and that kind of stuff, but like you are also preparing them for the next stage of life and preparing them and giving them skills. Like the fact that the students are self-reflecting. I don't know that I ever did a self-reflection until I entered the workforce and had like my performance review. And so it's just really interesting. Like I'm just really enjoying this, especially as an ex-educator of like, there are so many things missing that you guys are doing to help prepare them for successful post-educational life, which is one question that we get a lot with our adult community and our like post-grad community is like, I don't know how to do these things. I'm not prepared for life outside of school without that structure that school provides and the kind of like day-to-day life. So just really interesting to kind of talk about. So like that's why I was kind of smiling and laughing at the end there. But so I do have one very basic question. I honestly could have missed this at the beginning, but did you say how big the class sizes are, like student teacher ratio on average, or is there an average?
So we put no more than 7 in a classroom.
Wow.
So they are small, and just our model, and that seems to be the kind of the sweet spot. So it could be anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 students.
Wow.
in
Okay.
each class.
And then just to kind of, so I'm going to have like a two-sided piece here. The first thing is like, what would you say? I'm trying to figure out how to word it because it's like, I know what I'm trying to say. So what would you say would be like the top 3 things or aspects of the environment that would make a student successful in an online classroom versus not setting them up for success? Does that make sense? Like, are there things that you guys have learned and seen since starting this program that would prevent someone from having success in an online program that we can let people know about so that they find success? I'm not wording this right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's really knowing the student, but I can say
Okay.
it first starts by your workspace. I mean, it sounds so basic, but it is incredibly important, and that the student really and the parents really acknowledge this is school and this is a program. And so just like you would have your school time and be away for the day, you do have more flexibility, which is nice, but that's, it's the understanding of creating and very purposeful in the conversation of creating your own, experience in your own environment. But there is a workstation, and that, if they go away for vacations or things, that it's, that again, that workstation is key. It's really, really key that students are aware, and that technology being introduced prior, if there's any new technology, that there's time for students to be able to kind of practice with it or know kind of what's coming up with, and being very aware of what the expectations are up front as well. So whether that's with technology, what parts are going to be synchronous, what parts is not going to be synchronous. That's also just that expectation, kind of that framework of knowing what you're getting into.
Okay, perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. I just
Okay,
was like
good.
having a very hard time articulating that.
No, it's fine.
And then so
Yeah.
on the other side of that, what have you found, if anything, in this transition? Like, what's been maybe one of the bigger obstacles or hurdles overcoming being in person? So like where a teacher can actually sit down with a student and go through papers with them and kind of like, you know, point to things and be in that proximity versus being online. Like, what's been, if any, barriers in that transition, and how have you guys kind of overcome those in that virtual environment?
Yeah, I mean, I would say honestly is the camera piece. And I think that a lot of teachers and educators, if, you know, they're out there and watching is, you know, how do you, that's part of engagement, and how do you kind of handle this, turning the camera off or turning what's appropriate. But that's also part of the, you know, kind of agreement-based approach as well, in what's needed, and the student knows that what the expectation is. But also when you really think about it, if a student has, you know, turning the camera off is part of disengaging. And what we find is that over time, students are more willing to turn it on. And sometimes that actually can be part of the goal, is to have sustained time, you know, on, where they're not feeling like they need to retreat. So that is something that we, you know, that we work on, but also find that students really enjoy, and they have so many opportunities to be able to work with their peers and to have these social times and things that they look forward to, and they get really pumped up and excited, and bring your pet to school day or dress up day or different, you know, all kinds of different things, and they want to see, and so there's a lot of energy created around it as well. So
I also want to add that what's really
ahead.
important for that piece is establishing a relationship and deepening a relationship between the instructor and the students. So once they feel comfortable and they feel like you understand them, especially, I think that part is key. So I think that our in-depth assessment process and the ongoing assessments that further inform our understanding of who they are as learners, and helps us kind of predict what they're going to struggle with and how we should support them in an explicit way. I think really helps develop that relationship beyond just kind of establishing rapport with fun icebreaker games and things like that. I think that understanding piece is really key, especially when, you know, you're working on, say, reading comprehension. You really need to understand where that difficulty is coming from. If it's coming from that visual spatial core deficit, or is it an executive functioning core deficit? So you would approach it differently. So just that background of understanding impacts the instructor's ability to kind of connect with the student and reach them in an effective way. And that promotes students' willingness to engage in the conversation.
And so do instructors continue with the students year after year, or is it more of a traditional, like you get a new teacher each year, even though these aren't really like grades we're talking about, but like, are the instructors staying the same throughout the day, and are they staying the same throughout the year, or does that change?
They'll have different instructors for different, you know, different content areas, different classes. Some, you know, they might have an instructor that repeats the next year. It just really depends on the courses that they're, you know, that they're taking, who's teaching what, and then their focus instructor, they might have for a couple of years. We do change because we want them to also be exposed to other instructors.
Okay, very cool. And then just another kind of like small question from the beginning, but did you say that each of the classes is recorded as well? So you said they were going back and able to kind of like rewatch and re-listen to things. So every class is recorded?
Typically our classes are not recorded. They can,
Okay.
we have that ability to be able to do that if that's needed.
Needed.
But when we have tools like videos and things, just
Mm-hmm.
online learning in general, being able to, if that's part of the lesson plan, then they're able to reference those things and they can rewatch videos.
And it's important to teach them how to do that. You know, a lot of students come to us, they have no idea how to effectively kind of go back, review, look for certain things. So that's part of the instruction as well.
Sorry, I muted myself because the phone was ringing and I couldn't get it back off. Which kind of, and I know at one point you were talking about like the closed captioning on some of that stuff and how that's been very helpful. And as you're saying that, I'm like sitting here watching us on Facebook as the closed captioning is like coming up on our video. And it's interesting because I have found myself that I watch TV with closed captioning, and if I don't have it on, I like actually don't know what's happening. And so it's just kind of funny because you were like talking about that, and I'm like watching our Facebook video do the closed captioning. So I definitely think that's like a big piece of it too, is like having the visual, the auditory, and then also like the written all in one. And you can't really have like the written piece in a classroom. You're like frantically taking notes or doing a recorder or something like that. So very interesting.
Definitely.
I'm just going back through my notes really quick. Kind of just a question, just out of interest, the experiences and kind of like talking about having someone like build something with someone else online. Are you finding that online education is kind of providing more and wider experiences and kind of opportunities than a traditional classroom would have? Like if you can't have someone come into the classroom to do a presentation, like you're able to call someone in Germany or like in Asia and kind of like have these different experiences that maybe an online or like an in-person classroom wouldn't necessarily provide the opportunity for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't take for those things, it doesn't take the incredible resources of bringing someone live. Also, does take. And so our students have been able to see museums, New York, Washington State, really just a variety all over the place. And so they're actually working on a project with communicating and obviously very guided and structured with children in Ukraine.
Wow.
And so that was really very, very interesting. So there's just it again, really focuses the time you're able to be very, very productive and just more access. So it's fantastic.
That's amazing. What like great
would
opportunities for students.
Our brick and mortar campuses also really intentionally add these pieces because we work with students with learning disabilities. So the more hands-on, interactive kind of approach, the better. And since, of course, the pandemic, those opportunities for those amazing virtual trips and things like that are definitely used too. But we've been, Winston Prep has been doing this for ages. We have a long-standing relationship with a place called Boatworks in Manhattan. So they come in and work with one or two of our class groups in New York and build a boat. And it's really fantastic, especially for our NVLD students, to learn how to build something, to problem solve. It incorporates math and communication skills and problem solving. So we're always looking for experiences like that. But of course, I think we're even more intentional with our online programming.
Yeah, very cool. Those were like all of the kind of comments that I had made and notes that I had taken during the thing. And we don't have any comments or questions in the Facebook Live. But I know that just from past experience, the video tonight, once it's kind of been downloaded and people get home from work and start watching it and really kind of listen to this and take in information, I know that we will have questions in our Facebook comments. So I may send those over your way unless you're on our page and happen to see them, but probably collect some of those to hand off to you guys to get some answers for, but we're also at an hour. So I don't want to take up any more of y'all's time today, just because I know that you're both very busy doing important work over at Winston Prep. And it's just been, I've loved working with you guys in different aspects throughout the last few years here at the NVLD project, and just everything you're doing is truly amazing and kind of groundbreaking and innovative in this space. So I loved learning more about your online program. Definitely think it's super important. We'll post a couple links in the comments in case anybody's looking for more information. I've got the website, and I think I had a flyer that I can put in there, but it may be on the website as well. So we'll post some resources into the comments. And if you have any questions or comments, you're watching this later, please feel free to drop them below as well, and we will happily get them answered for you. But thank you, Tabitha and Michele. I appreciate you both joining us today and taking time out to kind of go through this programming and explain how it's working and the benefits of it, and how students are really finding online learning to be beneficial and having success with it. So that was amazing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.